I was once of the opinion that Murder Drones never really had a theme or message. It was kind of just watch the funny robots be funny. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've realized Murder Drones does have a theme. And that theme, trauma, how it affects people, and how people heal from it. In this video, I'll be going over 5 of the characters from the show, describe their traumas, how it affects their actions, and what they do to heal from them. Those 5 characters will be Uzi, N, V, Doll, and Tessa. However, before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe. I really want to turn this channel into a career of mine, and I'd appreciate your support. Anyway, let's get into it. Uzi grew up with no friends, classmates who either hated or ignored her, an emotionally negligent father, and, as far as she knew, a dead mom. Truth be told, she had no one. No one to talk to, no one who would listen to her, no one who cared about her. She was alone and very vulnerable. However, she didn't like that. She didn't want people to see her as vulnerable. She didn't want people to see her as weak. So she developed her edgy, not like other girls persona to try and convince people that she wasn't dying inside, that she took all her pain in stride and was owning it. However, her coping mechanism of creating her goth girl persona didn't help her in the long term, as it didn't combat her true problem. She was lonely, and just wanted someone who cared about her. And one day, while going out to find the last piece of her railgun she needs to save the world and earn her dad's respect and stuff, she meets N, serial designation N, the bloodthirsty drone killer, who was willing to sit down and talk to her. Sure, he was blind and thought she was a fellow disassembly drone, but he didn't immediately push her away as just being some weird emo. Sure, he admittedly was used to much worse treatment from much worse people, and Uzi was probably a saint compared to them, which we'll touch on more in his part. But even afterwards, when he realized she was a worker and that he would get in massive trouble with Jay if he let her go, he willingly spared her life. He saw her father leave her to die and took pity on her. Where afterwards the two came to develop a connection and eventually friendship. Uzi had made her first friend. His whole life, Anne has been used and abused. While we don't know much about his first life, his life before the Elliots, we can only assume he was still treated as a slave. Even if his owners were good owners, they were still his owners. Admittedly, his life with Tessa and her family might have been one of his happiest, but he still lived with them as a butler. Tessa may have been a good owner, but she was still an owner. He, Jay, and V might have been good servants, but they were still servants. However, his life as a disassembly drone was probably the worst. Not only did he have his entire body changed against his will, but now he was forced to take innocent lives as he relied on their bodies for sustenance. Not to mention, he also had his brain Swiss cheese to hell and back, causing him to forget all that forced experimentation stuff because, well, unlike sponges, memories aren't all that effective when they're full of holes. Not to mention, the people he was forced to serve under were downright awful to him. The most obvious one is Jay, who saw him as both a waste of materials and space. She literally wanted him dead, leaving a piece of paper that read, "Kill yourself," in a dog book that she knew N would read, and as a disassembly drone, she told N that if the company allowed it, she would have straight up killed him herself. Not to mention, she also stabbed him with a deadly virus after she saw he had started to doubt their mission. However, the solver was worse. It killed him several times over, wiping his memories of his past deaths, turned him into a monster, and forced him to kill an unspeakable amount of humans and drones. Not to mention, it could clone him an infinite amount of times, always having a new end if an old one got too close to the truth or became too rebellious. It saw him as disposable. In episode 7, it literally said that he had served his purpose and that his backups would forgive it. The worst part, there's no way of truly knowing what the solver did or forced him to do. No way of truly knowing how many clones of N it tortured, killed, and replaced. But you know what's worse? But you know what's even worse than what both Jay and the solver did to him combined? He enjoyed it. Well, enjoyed is a strong word, but he saw it as okay. He believed that being treated like trash was normal. He literally thanked Jay for stepping on his neck. He thanked her for looking out for him when he got stabbed with the virus. He was so used to being treated like disposable trash that he saw that behavior as okay. Then he meets Uzi. Sure, she's a little crass and rough around the edges, but she doesn't hurt him or belittle him. She values his opinions and sees him as a person. She doesn't see him as a product or a means to an end. She sees him as N. And when she questions him about what the company plans to do with him and the rest of the disassembly drones after they were finished with their mission on Copper 9, he doesn't know. He was just blindly following orders, doing what he was told, with no thought to the consequences. He never considered that JC Jensen would view him as just one of a million useless, worthless, disposable robots. V hid information from and hurt N, yet he did it to protect him. V remembered more than N from the manor. More of the killing, the bloodshed, the forced experimentation, more of the solver. She didn't want N to have to remember, to have the same painful memories she did. So she did her best to keep them hidden from him, to keep him in the dark about it. How did she do that? Avoid telling him anything she knew, anything that could help him get closer to the truth. She wanted him to stay in blissful ignorance, something she would love to have. However, her desire to keep N safe didn't just extend to keeping him safe from the solver, but keeping him safe from herself. She was afraid of losing N and the pain that would bring. So, if she developed a deep emotional attachment to N, like, say, reciprocating his crush, it would only hurt if she ever lost him again, and she wasn't ready to deal with that pain. So she pushed him away, pretended to be mean, pretended to be crass, pretended to not notice, not care, literally pretended to forget his name. No attachment, no pain. But then Uzi comes along, and her eye starts glitching with a solver symbol. V remembers their orders: kill all the solver infected drones on the planet. But N doesn't know, and he likes this little drone. He sees her as a friend, and he won't let V kill her because he doesn't know what she can do. It would be so easy for V to go behind N's back and kill her. After all, N's made friends with rocks before. He'd get over some pathetic worker, right? But as time goes on, V starts to understand more about Uzi, about why N likes her. She's smart, she's kind, she gives a damn about his opinions. Heck, she even tells him things. That's more than V ever could have done. And when she realizes N doesn't need her protection anymore, she's willing to let him go. Doll just wanted to be normal. She just wanted to be free from the solver's influence and live a normal teenage robot life. But she also wanted revenge. Revenge on the drone that took her parents from her. Revenge on the drone that set her down this path in the first place. V. After her parents' deaths, Doll became obsessed with getting her revenge on V, to the point she no longer cared about anyone else, including caring about who lived and who died. Of course, being solver infected, she had to drink the oil of the workers around her to avoid overheating, so it's hard to fault her for that. However, it's hard to tell how many workers she kills out of necessity and how many she kills for other, less justifiable reasons. The amount of oil she has in her house, you can't tell me she drinks all of it. At least not before going out and killing more workers. The prom girls, that was to lure V into the bunker. Even at prom, she kills two other worker drones, one for the crime of getting in her way, and the other for seemingly no reason at all. Why? V. Everything Doll does is about V. All of the prom related deaths she caused were about V. Doll was obsessed with V. All she cared about was killing V to avenge her parents, not caring about who she had to hurt to do so. All that mattered to her was that V ended up dead. But after prom, when she had failed to kill V and ended up getting killed herself, she learned that Uzi had the solver as well. Finally, someone who could understand her pain, someone she could help. But even after learning she and Uzi were stuck in the same boat, she still chose to go it alone. At every turn, she either leaves Uzi on her own, which usually ends in Uzi getting hurt, or she actively antagonizes her, setting back her own progress in terms of investigating the solver, even going as far as to sentence Uzi to death by dinosaur after getting to the elevator. However, in the end, her refusal to accept help would be her downfall. Both Uzi and Doll ended up getting cornered by Tessa, whose goal was to have them both dead. However, what separated them in these moments was that they had backup, or at the very least, Uzi did. When Uzi had been pinned down by Tessa and was about to be stabbed, N was there, sword in hand, and ready to do whatever it took to save Uzi. He had had enough of Tessa's shadiness and now only cared about keeping Uzi safe. However, Doll was all alone. When she was attacked by Tessa, she had to try to protect herself. She didn't have anyone she could turn to or rely on for help in that moment, so she ended up getting killed by the very monster she was fighting against. In her last moments, all she could do was find Uzi and hope that just maybe she'd be able to fight back. Tessa's parents hated her. Her mother seemed to view her as an embarrassment, and while we don't know much about her relationship with her father, it can be assumed he was generally apathetic towards his daughter, occasionally finding her creepy. Either way, he didn't care much about her, as he was complicit in Louise's abuse of her, which included chaining her up to her bedpost like she was a misbehaving dog. Yet, despite her loveless upbringing, when she was given the opportunity to essentially be a mother to three worker drones she rescued from the dump, she chose to be the opposite of what her parents were. While her parents were cruel and demanding, Tessa loved her drones, flaws and all. She saw them almost like her children, little ones she had to protect, keep happy, and keep safe. Heck, she probably cared for them more than she should have, considering they were robots. However, there was one drone she had found, one who was different than the others in a way she could never guess. Sin, little Sin. She was different than the other drones Tessa rescued. She was small, had an odd way of walking, and an odd way of talking, but that was okay to Tessa. She was a worker drone deserving of a home. Tessa could have never guessed that by saving that worker, she not only caused the deaths of her parents and countless other fancy rich people, but also her own, and lead to the destruction of the entire human race. The worst part? She couldn't even find peace in death, with her skin being worn by Sin and used to masquerade as her, tricking her once beloved drones into assisting the very entity they were trying to defeat. In Tessa's heartfelt attempt to try and break the cycle of abuse, she ended up causing something worse than she could even imagine. Trauma is a complicated thing to talk about and even more complicated to get right. However, I do have to applaud this show for not only deciding to tackle the subject, but showing such a wide branch of ways characters can deal with it. From finding others to confide in, to harming others in the pursuit of their own interest. And it pains me that the fandom can't recognize this. So many times in this fandom, I've seen people either make a character's trauma their entire personality and use it to absolve them of all blame, or ignore it and try to spin them as the second coming of Satan, when these characters are much more complex and fascinating than a lot of people give them credit for. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day.